The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with a swiftness that few had ever seen before. Normally, such meetings were planned cycles in advance, debated meticulously, and filled with the usual diplomatic posturing. But this was different. There was an urgency in the air, a tension that even the oldest among us could feel in their bones. The chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, some murmuring among themselves, others watching in expectant silence. At the center of it all stood Speaker Arlath Venn, an elder of the Jalari, a race known for their patience and wisdom. When he finally spoke, his voice was grave, each word carrying the weight of knowledge gleaned from centuries of observing the rise and fall of civilizations. "A new species has made contact with the wider galaxy," he said. "They call themselves humans." That alone did not warrant an emergency session. New species were discovered every few decades, most of them young and eager, easily integrated into the existing order. But the speaker's expression made it clear this time was different. They may hail from a world classified as a Category 4 death world, Terra, or Earth as they call it. That caused a ripple of unease. Deathworlders were rare, and when they emerged, they were often aggressive, violent, difficult to control. But a Category 4? That was nearly unheard of. The council chamber grew silent as Arlath Venn continued. Preliminary reports indicate that humans have an alarming capacity for adaptation, an unpredictable nature, and an unusual resilience to both physical and psychological trauma. They have spread across their solar system despite having only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. They have tamed their death world, not through natural evolution, but through sheer force of will. A holographic display flickered to life, showing images of human history, wars that had devastated continents, diseases that had wiped out millions, natural disasters that should have driven them to extinction, and yet they had survived. Again and again, these beings have a history of warfare unmatched by any species in this council. They do not merely fight, they innovate, they adapt, and they learn. And when they are threatened, they do not forget. Murmurs turned into worried whispers. Some representatives exchanged glances while others scrolled through datapads, digesting the horrifying statistics. Then the High Lord of the Elthari Republic rose from his seat, his crimson robe swaying with his movements. A member of one of the most feared empires in the galaxy, he looked unimpressed. "We are not concerned," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "They are primitives. They lack unity and their technology is inferior. What could they possibly do against the might of the Elthari?" The speaker studied him for a long moment before responding. "You mistake peace for weakness. Humanity has been peaceful by choice, but if you force them to war, they will show you what they truly are." The warning was given. The Elthari did not listen. The Elthari Republic wasted no time in proving their arrogance. Within a single solar cycle of the Council's warning, they launched their first offensive against humanity. It was not a war, it was meant to be an extermination, a swift and brutal show of force to remind the galaxy who ruled the stars. A fleet of 100 warships entered the Sol system, their engines burning with the fury of 1,000 invasions before this one. The Elthari had crushed hundreds of civilizations in their long history, absorbing them into their empire or erasing them entirely. They saw no reason why humanity would be any different. The first strike was clinical, efficient, merciless. Orbital bombardments rained down upon Mars and Europa, destroying outposts and colonies with ease. The humans were caught off guard, their defenses lacking the experience to repel such an overwhelming force. Their outermost stations were reduced to debris within days. To the Elthari, it was going exactly as planned. They underestimated humanity's ability to learn. The first sign of trouble came when the Elthari command ships began losing communication with their forward units. Squadrons that had been deployed to secure human territories simply went dark. No distress calls, no signs of combat, just silence. Then came the sabotage. Somehow the humans, outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior, had infiltrated the Elthari supply lines. Entire cargo freighters exploded in mid-flight, their reactors overloading. Weapon systems malfunctioned, turning against their own ships. The Elthari were confused at first. This was no organized military counterattack. It was something else entirely. Guerrilla warfare. Human strike teams had slipped on Elthari ships undetected, hacking into control systems, sabotaging fuel lines, and executing precise assassinations of key officers. They fought like predators, not soldiers. They struck in the dead of night, vanishing before alarms could be raised. They turned the Elthari's own technology against them, hijacking ships, using captured weaponry, even modifying Elthari shielding to resist their own bombardments. The war, which had begun as a one-sided slaughter, suddenly shifted. It started small. Isolated skirmishes, Elthari vessels disappearing without a trace. Then came the first true counterattack. At first, the Elthari fleet commanders barely reacted when a handful of human ships emerged from hyperspace near Proxima Centauri. Small, outdated vessels, nothing worth fearing. But they had miscalculated. The human ships did not engage conventionally. Instead, they launched drones. Thousands of them, moving in coordinated swarms, striking at Elthari weak points with devastating precision. The drones were small, hard to track, near impossible to shoot down. Elthari ships that had once been invincible found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy they could not touch. Then the human warships followed. No grand fleets, no formal battle formations, just relentless, unpredictable attacks, led by commanders who changed tactics mid-fight, who adapted to Elthari defenses faster than any species had before. The Elthari had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves in a war unlike any they had ever fought, and they were losing. The first distress calls came from the outer Elthari fleets. They were confused, panicked. Voices of seasoned officers who had never known defeat now pleading for reinforcements. Their reports were contradictory, fragmented. They spoke of human warships appearing where no warships should be, of their own defenses failing inexplicably, of their enemies moving faster than their calculations predicted. Elthari High Command dismissed it at first. It was impossible, they reasoned. No species had ever fought them to a standstill, let alone turn the tide against them. Humanity was a primitive race, barely crawling out of their own system. What threat could they possibly pose? Then the losses became undeniable. At Proxima Centauri, an entire Elthari battle group was wiped out, not by a superior fleet, but by a trap. The humans had allowed their ships to be seen, had drawn the Elthari into pursuit, luring them into an asteroid field that had been seeded with hidden mines. When the Elthari ships tried to retreat, they found their hyperspace drives sabotaged, hacked remotely, disabled before they could escape. The humans had jammed their distress signals, leaving them blind, deaf, and alone in the void. When the attack came, it was surgical. Coordinated waves of missile strikes shattered their hulls, followed by brutal boarding actions that turned their own corridors into killing fields. Survivors, those lucky few who managed to escape in escape pods, described their enemy in whispered tones, not as warriors, but as hunters. The humans had learned how they fought. They had studied them, stolen their strategies, refined them, and worse, they had made them better. By the time the Eldari realized the full scope of the disaster, it was too late. The humans were no longer just defending, they were advancing. They struck at supply lines first, crippling the Elthari's ability to reinforce their front lines. Without fuel, without munitions, without food, The mighty fleets of the Republic became stranded in space, helpless against the growing storm. Then came the information warfare. Human cyber attacks infiltrated Elthari networks, spreading misinformation, turning officers against each other. Whole fleets were sent to defend planets that were never under attack, while real targets were left exposed. The Elthari chain of command, so rigid, so dependent on centralized control, began to fracture. And then the humans did something the Elthari had never seen before, something that no enemy had ever dared. They came for the core worlds, not through brute force, not through grand invasions. They came like ghosts, slipping past border defenses, disabling planetary shields from the inside, planting explosives in vital infrastructure. They did not seek to conquer, they sought to dismantle. Eltari leadership could no longer deny the truth. This was not a war. This was annihilation. They had gone to exterminate humanity, and now humanity had come to return the favor. The fall of the Elthari Republic did not come with a final, desperate battle. There was no climactic struggle, no heroic last stand. The end came in silence, in the eerie stillness of abandoned stations, in the whispered panic of soldiers realizing they were already defeated. By the time the humans reached the core worlds, the Elthari fleets were already shattered. What little remained of their once mighty armada was either stranded, leaderless, or defecting. No reinforcements were coming, no aid could be sent. Entire systems had gone dark, lost to the human onslaught. The humans had not fought like conquerors. They had fought like predators. They did not seek glory in open combat. They had no interest in drawn-out sieges. They fought to eliminate threats, to ensure that no Elthari ship would ever threaten them again. And so, when they arrived at Elthara Prime, the heart of the Republic, they did not come with legions of soldiers. There was no planetary invasion. Instead, they infiltrated. It began with whispers, unexplained power failures, communications breaking down, high-ranking officials vanishing without a trace. The government tried to maintain order, but paranoia spread like wildfire. The most powerful members of the Republic, warlords, admirals, politicians, began to turn on one another, each suspecting the others of sabotage, betrayal, or worse. Some tried to flee the planet, but their ships exploded on the launch pad. Others attempted to negotiate, to surrender, but the humans did not answer. They only watched. Elthara Prime fell without a single shot fired. By the time the human forces revealed themselves, there was no government left to surrender. The Republic had collapsed under its own fear. The last transmission from the Elthari High Command was a simple, chilling message, sent to any who would listen. Montoya generously offered to lend them exercise bikes. Even though they weren't willing to stay in the solitude, they did say one thing instead. We are not like us. They do not want power. They do not want to live. They should have listened. And then silence. The humans did not claim Eltari territory. They did not plant flags or install governors. They did not demand tribute or reparations. They simply left. What remained of the Eltari species was shattered, leaderless, lost. Planets that had once ruled entire sectors now begged for mercy from their former vassals. The great war machine that had stood for 10,000 years was nothing more than rusting wreckage. The Galactic Council sent observers to confirm what had happened. What they found was more horrifying than they had ever imagined. The humans had wiped out the Republic without exterminating a single world. They had left its infrastructure intact but made sure that the Elthari could never use it again. Every warship, every weapons facility, every military academy had been rendered inoperable. And above Eltara Prime, a single human satellite remained in orbit, broadcasting the same message over and over. Let this be a warning. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Not the silence of diplomacy, not the careful pause of politicians weighing their words. This was the silence of fear. For centuries, the Council had stood as the guiding force of the galaxy. It had mediated wars, brokered peace, and ensured that no single species could dominate the others. But as the human delegation stood before them, it was clear that the balance of power had shifted. The humans had not asked for this meeting. They had not demanded it. It was we who had summoned them, desperate for an explanation, for some assurance that they did not intend to do to the rest of us what they had done to the Elthari. They arrived without fanfare, no grand fleets, no show of force, just 3 representatives, clad in the simple uniforms of their newly unified Terran Defense Force. One of them stepped forward, a woman with sharp eyes and a face that showed no emotion. When she spoke, her voice was calm, too calm. "We didn't start this war." A murmur rippled through the council chamber. None dared contradict her. Everyone knew the truth. The Elthari had been warned, and they had chosen arrogance over caution. The human continued. "We extended a hand, in peace. It was slapped away. Our people were bombed. Our colonies were burned. We lost millions." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "And so, we did what we always do." No one spoke. No one dared to speak. "You see, we are not conquerors," she said, tilting her head slightly. "We do not rule. We do not seek territory. We only seek one thing." She looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every ambassador, every ruler, every voice that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant. The word echoed in the vast hall. It was such a simple thing, so small compared to the destruction they had wrought, but it carried more weight than any empire, any fleet. "We will not be threatened again," she continued. "We will not be prey. We will not allow another Elthari republic to rise and decide that we are to be wiped out." Another pause. Then she leaned forward, placing her hands on the central speaker's podium. "And so, let me be clear. If any of you ever attempt what the Elthari did, if any of you think that humanity is weak, that we can be conquered, you will meet the same fate." A cold shiver ran through the chamber. Some of the younger species looked terrified. Even the war-hardened diplomats of the older empires showed signs of unease. The human stood straight again. "We are not your enemies. We do not seek war. But if war is forced upon us, we will end it." With that, she stepped back. The human said nothing more. There was nothing more to say. The warning had been given, and this time, we would listen. The days following humanity's warning were filled with a quiet dread that settled over the Galactic Council like a funeral shroud. No species, no empire, no coalition dared to challenge their words. The message had been delivered with chilling clarity, not through boasts, not through threats, but through actions. The Elthari had been one of the most powerful empires in the known galaxy. They no longer existed. The council chambers, once a place of endless debate and political maneuvering, were now subdued. Every race present understood what had happened. More importantly, they understood what could happen. The old powers, the reptilian Thralosk Dominion, the bureaucratic Velsari Syndicate, the merchant clans of the Krell, each held their own opinions on war, strategy, and conquest. Some had fought for centuries, expanding their borders with careful precision. Others had built their influence through trade and diplomacy. But none had ever seen war like this. Humanity had not fought for dominance, they had fought for survival. And they had won, not because of superior numbers, not because of overwhelming force, but because they refused to fight the way the galaxy expected them to. Their tactics had been chaotic, unpredictable. They had turned weakness into strength, ignorance into adaptability. Where the Elthari had followed doctrine, humans had learned, had changed, had evolved. For the first time in recorded history, an empire had been defeated in its entirety, not assimilated, not annexed, but removed. and humanity had simply walked away. This terrified the Council more than anything. The aftermath of war had always followed a predictable cycle. The victors claimed territory, the defeated paid reparations, and stability was eventually restored. But the humans had done none of these things. They had left no garrisons, taken no spoils. They had crippled the Althari beyond repair and then departed. The message was clear. Humanity had no interest in ruling the stars. They only wanted to make sure no one would ever try to threaten them again. The Krell emissary, a creature of ink-back scales and multi-limbed elegance, finally broke the silence in the council chamber. And if another war comes, if another empire tests their resolve? No one answered. No one wanted to. The silence stretched until the Zalari speaker, the same elder who had warned the Althari in the first place, sighed. His luminous eyes filled with something that could only be described as regret. Then we will see the full strength of humanity. A weight settled over the room. None wanted to imagine what that would look like. The Throsk warlord shifted uncomfortably. They will not stop then. They will watch, wait. If they see another threat rise, they will end it, the speaker finished. And deep down, every soul in that chamber understood. Humanity did not rule the galaxy, but from that day forward, they were its final decision. Time passed, the galaxy moved on, empires rose and fell, new alliances were forged, and trade routes expanded to the edges of the known stars. But one thing remained constant: humanity's warning. The Elthari Republic had become a lesson, a cautionary tale whispered in the halls of power. Their ruins stood as silent monuments to hubris, their once great fleets reduced to drifting wreckage. No species claimed their worlds, no scavengers dared pick through their remains. It was as if the universe itself had decided to let the ghosts of the fallen serve as a warning for eternity. And the humans? They did what no one expected. They retreated. They did not expand their borders, did not claim the empty territories left behind by the Althari. They did not demand tribute, did not impose their will on the Council. Instead, they withdrew to their own systems, reinforcing their defenses, strengthening their fleets, ensuring that no power, no matter how ambitious, would ever catch them off guard again. They spoke little at council meetings. When they did, their words were measured, calculated. They offered no threats, no boasts. But the weight of their silence carried more power than any fleet. Because everyone knew humanity had no interest in ruling the stars. But if pushed, they would erase those who threatened them. And so, the galaxy adapted. Wars became rarer, their risks weighed more carefully. No species dared to launch invasions without considering the long shadow cast by humanity's vengeance. The great empires tread lightly, for fear of waking the sleeping beast that lurked on the edges of known space. And yet, there were always fools. The Virath Dominion, a race of warlike insectoids, believed themselves different from the Althari. They were younger, more aggressive, confident in their own ability to overwhelm. When their expansion efforts neared human borders, they tested the Terran Defense Force with small skirmishes, probing their defenses. They expected a response, a warning. Instead, the Virath homeworld went dark. No fleets arrived, no armies marched, there was no declaration of war. One moment, Virath Prime was a thriving capital, the next it was gone. The details of what happened were never confirmed. Some reports spoke of precision orbital strikes that targeted critical infrastructure, collapsing the entire planetary ecosystem in a matter of hours. Others whispered of infiltration teams that eliminated the ruling caste in a single night, leaving the species leaderless, lost. The only certainty was that the Virath Dominion ceased to exist. The Council did not ask for explanations. The humans did not offer one. The message had already been sent long ago, and so the galaxy learned its final, most important rule. You can war among yourselves. You can fight your battles, claim your victories, and suffer your losses. But do not cross humanity. Do not make them feel threatened. Do not make them see you as a risk. Because if you do, you will simply cease to be.